described on the CCTA website. The chair will call upon members, staff, and other speakers by name. Please speak clearly and state your name before giving comments or remarks. Persons participating via Zoom with their cameras enabled are reminded that their activities are visible to viewers. Members participating by Zoom wishing to speak should physically raise their hand and unmute their mic when called upon. Members should remute their mics when done speaking. Citizens participating by Zoom wishing to speak should use the Raise Hand feature or dial *9 if participating via phone, and the chair or staff will call upon them at the appropriate time. Citizens will have 3 minutes to speak. A 30-second warning will be provided. After 3 minutes, staff will lower their hand and mute their mic. Participants via phone will be called upon by the last 4 digits of their phone number. It is requested that public speakers state their names and organization, but providing such information is voluntary. Written public comments received in accordance with the COVID-19 Special Notice for Public Comment Guidelines are printed on the meeting agenda. If authors of the written correspondence would like to speak, they should raise their hand and the chair will call upon them at the appropriate time. All written correspondence received after that and during the meeting will be entered into the record. A roll call vote will be taken for all action items. Thank you for participating in a meeting of the Contra Costa Transportation Authority.
Thank you. So let's move ahead. Jackie, could you please take the roll call?
Yes, Commissioner Haskew. Commissioner Hudson.
Here.
Commissioner Mitchoff.
Here.
Yeah.
Thank you, Loyal.
Yeah.
Vice Chair Romick.
Here.
Chair Kelly.
Here. Thank you. So it looks like we've got a quorum. So the next item on the agenda is public comment. Jackie, have we received any public comment cards?
No public comment.
And is there anyone wishing to speak during public comment right now? Okay, so then let's move ahead. So the next item on our agenda is approval of the minutes from September 2nd, 2020. Does anyone have any
This is
changes?
Romick, move approval.
Hudson second.
Who was that?
Romick.
Okay, motion by Romick, seconded by Hudson. Any discussion? Okay, Jackie, could you take the roll call, please?
Yes, Commissioner Haskew.
Yes.
Commissioner Hudson.
I said yes.
Thank
Maybe
you.
I said it while I was muted, but that's okay.
Thank you. Commissioner Mitchoff.
Yes.
Vice Chair Romick.
Yes.
Chair Kelly.
Yes. Thank you. Passes unanimously. So our next item on the agenda is the consent calendar. Are there any changes or comments? Does anyone care to pull an item from the consent calendar? If so, could
I'll
you
move
raise
for
your
it.
hand now? No? Okay, so who moved that? Dave?
Second,
Motion.
Haskew.
Motion by Hudson, seconded by Haskew. Any discussion? Jackie, could you take the roll call, please, for the consent calendar?
Commissioner Haskew.
Yes.
Commissioner Hudson.
Yes.
Commissioner Mitchoff.
Yes.
Vice Chair Romick.
Yes.
Chair Kelly.
Yes. Passes unanimously. So now we move on to regular agenda items. And there's an action item for approval to release the request for proposals for 2005 for the development of a vehicle miles travel mitigation program framework for Contra Costa, presented by Matt Kelly. Matt?
Thank you, Chair Kelly. Good evening, Planning Committee members. Matt Kelly here, Senior Transportation Planner with the Authority. Last October, a year ago October, the Authority staff submitted a Sustainable Communities grant application to Caltrans in order to fund a study to develop a VMT, Vehicle Miles Traveled Mitigation Program for Contra Costa. This past June, Caltrans announced an award of $400,000 to the Authority to fund this effort. The concept of a countywide VMT mitigation program would support Contra Costa's local jurisdictions in their efforts to implement land use decisions and transportation enhancements that seek to reduce reliance on single occupant vehicles, and would also serve as a mechanism to streamline approval of measure funded transportation improvements on the state highway system. In September, you all, the Authority, approved entering into a funding agreement with Caltrans And in November, we received notice that that was complete, and we have a notice to proceed from Caltrans, allowing us to move forward with the project. And the first step is to go out and retain a qualified consultant team. So staff's recommendation tonight is to approve the release of request for proposals 2005 in order to retain a consultant team who can assist the authority in establishing this groundbreaking mitigation program in the state. So I can take any questions.
Thank you, Matt. Are there any questions for Matt? Please.
If not, I'll move the item.
Second,
Oh,
Romick.
okay. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak on this item? Okay. So no discussion, seeing none. Mitchoff has made a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Oh my God.
Second, Romick.
And Rovick seconds. Any discussion?
Yeah,
Jackie, could you
I'd
take
just
the
like
roll
to
call?
say Everybody's waiting for this darn thing. Please keep
I
us
know.
posted as fast as things happen.
Okay, I'm going to do roll call. Commissioner Haskew,
Yes.
Commissioner Hudson,
Yes.
Commissioner Mitchoff,
Yes.
Vice Chair Romick,
Yes.
Chair Kelly.
Yes. Passes
Okay,
unanimously.
Motion passes unanimously.
Great, thank you. So our next item on the agenda is the Richmond and Pittsburgh Bay Point Community-Based Transportation Plans, again presented by Matt Kelly. Matt?
Thank you, Chair Kelly. The Planning Committee members may remember approving the Martinez and Monument Corridor Community-Based Transportation Plans, or CBTPs, back in April. These two new CBTPs, Richmond and Pittsburgh Bay Point area, were prepared by our consultant PlaceWorks, and together these four will complete our 2018 round of updating the plans. They were funded in 2018. The goal of CBTPs is to improve mobility options for low-income communities around the Bay Area by bringing together community organizations along with transportation agencies to identify these local neighborhoods' most important transportation challenges and develop strategies to overcome those challenges. So several community-based organizations were engaged in each plan to facilitate the outreach to the communities and collect that information. And the communities were directly engaged at community events to solicit their opinions on transportation-related issues they encounter. And Greg's going to go into more detail on these in just a second. Strategies to close those transportation gaps and develop recommendations was guided by project working groups and steering committees made up of local agency staff, elected officials, and community-based organization staff. Projects identified through this CBTP process qualify for funding under the Regional Lifeline Transportation Program. So it's dedicated to funding CBTPs. The funding to prepare the CBTP was provided by MTC. They do it roughly every 10 years. And these two CBTPs were last updated in the mid-2000s. So it's been a while. We thought it was good to focus on these two communities again. So in terms of timing of these, we had good timing in the sense that we completed all of our public outreach in February, just ahead of the pandemic. But that also left us wondering if the data we collected from the community was still valid. So Greg will talk about how we address COVID in the plans, but we really want to stress that these are 10+ year planning documents, and they focus on basic mobility within the communities. So most of the ultimate recommendations are valid during and beyond the pandemic. But now I'll hand it over to Greg Goodfellow from PlaceWorks, and he'll provide a summary of the Richmond and Pittsburgh Bay Point area CBTPs. Greg? You're muted, Greg.
All right, thank you, Matt. Thank you, Chair Kelly and commissioners. Let me make sure that my screen sharing is successful here. Are you guys seeing my screen?
Not yet.
Unless Chris is your screen.
Oh, here we go. 1 second here. Oh, hold on. Oh, come now.
Let me know if you want me to throw it up there, Greg.
This is strange. How about now?
Yes.
Okay, I apologize.
Greg, can you go to the slideshow view?
1 second. There we go.
There you go. Thank you.
All right, everybody, as Matt suggested and explained a little bit, community-based transportation planning is an MTC program that supports projects that are developed through a collaborative, inclusive planning process that engages a broad range of stakeholders. And I'll talk about some of those stakeholders that we work with in a few moments. They improve a range of transportation choices by adding new and expanded services. And they address transportation gaps or barriers identified in community-based transportation plans, such as those we just completed. And those plans are based on local outreach efforts to low-income populations. Also, as Matt suggested, we performed our outreach just before the pandemic, but performed our analysis afterwards. Now, what does that mean? It means the feedback that we collected does not reflect changes in mobility due to the shelter-in-place orders, new commutes, lack of transit or changed transit behaviors, et cetera. And the reality is that COVID-19 has impacted the financial feasibility, mostly of transit projects, and thus the way we rank them in our CBTPs, given that financial feasibility and implementability was one of our ranking measures. However, current transit use affirms that disadvantaged communities will rely and do rely on transit and will continue to do so in the future. In other words, we know that transit gaps need to be filled, even though right now they may have not be reflected in our priority rankings. We've spoken to MPC about this and the other CBTPs we're working on. We know that MPC is very amenable to flexibility, and these plans are considered amenable to revision based on a return to either normal or, quote, new normal conditions, whatever those may be in the coming months or years. And so it's important to remember that in the ultimate ranking of our recommendations, transit projects may rank lower than some of our active transportation or school safety projects, but that does not mean that they are not amenable to funding the way some of these other projects are, or that they won't be considered just as high potential in the future. All right, quick overview of our study areas. This is the Richmond area, as you can see, mostly Richmond, parts of San Pablo, a little bit of El Cerrito, some of the unincorporated areas to the north. The hatched lines are what are considered the communities of concern, which are MTC census tracts that have these factors of low income, low vehicle ownership, rent burden households, et cetera, that make up communities of concern and, quote, disadvantaged populations. Here's the Pittsburgh Bay Point CBTP area, most of Bay Point, most or all of Pittsburgh, and then the edge of Antioch up to A Street and a few unincorporated areas as well. First part of our project was a lot of existing conditions research, looking at everything from vehicle availability to pedestrian collision density to youth and senior populations, and of course the existing transit system, many other issues beyond these. These are just a sampling. And of course the community outreach, which is a key guiding factor for all CBTPs. Another small example of what we did, here's 4. Met with senior brown bag lunches, talked to senior citizens, spent time at the Greater Richmond Interface program community lunch. As people were in line to get free lunches, brought out our boards, had them mark up areas where they had problems getting around, where they wanted to go, what their solutions were. Went to Los Medanos Community College Mustang Day. All the new students were in. They had amazing ideas about buses, getting down Railroad Avenue to community college. Issues about taking evening classes and the fact that bus stops running right when they're coming out of evening classes and it's hard to get around, get back to their families. Went to the food bank of Contra Costa and Solano counties to their giveaways and talked to low income and disabled people in those events about getting around, and cracked sidewalks and their issues with mobility all over the county, or excuse me, the study area. And these are just a sampling of some of the events we went to. Some of the feedback themes we got in both areas: insufficient bus frequencies, which are normal across CBTPs historically; gaps in intersections on San Pablo Avenue, which are borne out in past studies across San Pablo and Richmond; bike and ped rights of way near Nickel Park and Central Richmond; at-grade rail crossing safety in the Pittsburgh Bay Point area; Tri-Delta routes 380, 381, 388, 387. Those were issues mostly coming from Los Medanos College in terms of getting into central Pittsburgh. A lot of feedback about bike ped gaps and safety along Delta De Anza Regional Trail. Okay, how do we prioritize these recommendations? First step was to create a scoring system. We scored each recommendation on a range of 1 to 5 on 4 criteria. How well does it reflect community priorities? How well will it increase access in the study area? And criteria 3 and 4 are more about implementability, financial feasibility and ease of implementation. Criterion 3 being more straightforward: how much will it cost, how much funding would be available; and criterion 4, implementation: will it demand cross-jurisdictional coordination, or is it a complex engineering challenge, things like that. And then we took these scores and we averaged the 2 different scores to create an overall area need score. That's taking criterion 1, community priorities, and criterion 2, whether it increases access. And then we created a project potential score by averaging criterion 3, financial feasibility, and criterion 4, ease of implementation. And then each recommendation based on those scores was either labeled high need and high potential. Those projects had an area need score of above 3.5 and a project potential score of above 3.5. Or they were high need recommendations. Those had an area need score of above 3.5, but their project potential score was lower. Why did we do that? That was mostly to improve decision-making in the future. We could have averaged all of the scores into one single rank, but we felt this way it allowed agencies and grant funders and grant finders to sort of say, what should we look at first? What are going to be the highest potential now versus those projects we know are important, but may be harder to implement at this time. And this goes back to my COVID statement about transit projects, many of which receive that lower project potential at this point because funding is going to be harder for them to find, and because transit agencies are more strapped for cash at this point. All right, a very quick summary of our findings in the Richmond area. Active transportation. We had a lot of good ideas for connected and completed bike routes. Let's take this mishmash of routes right now and put them all together around parks and schools. We heard a lot about MacArthur Boulevard and bike and ped improvements needed there, that central route to the community. And we heard about ADA compliance in some of the senior areas and in Tara Hills in the northern unincorporated areas. Transit, again, our higher priority and higher implementation recommendations were not about programming, more about lighting, signage, and shelters on some of those key routes. These are those projects that are going to be more implementable, more financially feasible at this point. And then school safety, a lot of recommendations about safe routes to school at specific campuses, and improved BART campus routes for children coming from BART and to BART on their bikes and on foot.
Greg, just wanted to note that MacArthur, I think, should be McDonald Avenue.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I apologize.
Making me hungry.
All right, in Pittsburgh Bay Point, another quick rundown: active transportation. We heard a lot about improved local intersections, bike and ped facilities on major corridors such as Bailey Road, which can be dangerous, we heard, for cyclists and pedestrians. We heard about safer State Route 4 crossings. One of the big things we heard, and this is borne out by past studies as well, is that State Route 4 is basically a major barrier to active transportation across the study area. We also heard about West 10th Street in Antioch, which is a cut through for State Route 4 drivers, and they need to put buffers and better intersections on West 10th Street. Transit, Tri-Delta should keep going on their half-barrel shelter program along a lot of their routes. Certain routes in Tri-Delta have no shelters at all. Students in particular and seniors feel unsafe along a lot of those routes. And then something that was interesting is that we heard from senior citizen centers that they would like to see paratransit routes move and be programmed at the same hours as traditional routes. And what we found out from our project working group is that, wait, hey, we've got this Try My Ride service. Seniors can get on this any time of day. And what we found out was that, all right, you know what we need to do is that we need to come up with a program that says, you need to boost this informational campaign for the service because seniors simply didn't know about it, even directors of senior centers. So this is a great recommendation, is boosting this information campaign for this new service. And again, school safety projects similar to Richmond area, safe routes to school at specific campuses in all three communities, Bay Point, Pittsburgh, and Antioch. And that's it. I wanted to do a quick rundown. I know we want to get through this. Dave Hudson.
First, you must unmute. If I understand this correctly, we're going to be sending this to the full board for approval. And you did meetings and got comments. I'm specifically discussing the Pittsburgh Bay Point area because you're going to get asked this question or you're going to get told this question about this area. Nothing about a waterfront project or any of these things federal's been discussing?
Dave, so the CBTPs, the way they're supposed to work is all the issues, the challenges are supposed to come from the community in the communities of concern. It's not supposed to come from staff or the consultants or anything like that. So unless we hear it on the street from the community, we're really not supposed to weave it into this.
Matt, I'm gonna make it easy for you. I'm fine with that. I'm just prepping you for the question you're gonna get asked.
I appreciate
that. You're not gonna have Kevin running interference for you. So just be prepared that this is, if it's Pittsburgh Bay Point, you're not going through there with just the things I just saw. Chair Kelly can discuss whatever she thinks Richmond can be, because I thought it was pretty clear cut too, unless she or Tom have something to say. But I just can't imagine you're going to get through Pittsburgh Bay Point without Federal Glover chiming in.
I would say that for for Richmond, I think it does identify, you know, the needs for more bicycle paths, more routes and things like that. I don't, you know, it's not like Federal's area on the waterfront where that is supposed to be a jewel and try to bring in a lot of economic development. I mean, this is about transportation, and certainly in Richmond, for people who already live there, and they're just trying to get to the BART, they're just trying to get to their jobs. You know, they may be trying to get to, in Richmond, Contra Costa College to take some classes, you know, so that's what their concerns are. But I think, Dave, you bring up a very good point about the larger board and what some people may say. So thanks for alerting Matt.
Yeah, that is helpful.
Yeah. Other questions here?
Madam Chair?
Yeah, can we go back to the big screen?
Yeah, because I was trying to raise my hand and I can't.
And I just see, yeah, thank you very much, Greg, for your presentation. Yeah, Karen?
Sure. Thank you. And I appreciate the comment, staff, about how this has to come from the community, but I'm concerned about our seniors. I didn't see anything in here about seniors and how to get from point A to point B to point C without having to change buses. And I was looking for, and I'm sorry if I missed how outreach was done, but a lot of times the senior community is left out. And Debbie Toth, and I know we all would be saying that, there's Kevin and Luella, we will get crucified if we don't have something in there. So how do we get it in there? When you say this is going to the full board, is that the time when our advocates should be there saying, hey, wait a minute, this group needs to be thought of? We just can't leave them behind, folks.
So I'll let Greg speak, but I think we did do some pretty good outreach to the senior community. Greg, can you?
Yeah. Well, I spent hours at the Antioch Senior Center with both the director and residents and what they call their resident transit guru, as well as discussions with the Pittsburgh Senior Center director. And in Richmond, most of our discussions at GRIP, that's the Greater Richmond Interfaith Council, were with seniors. And I mean, I think this speaks back to the issue of vetting the direct input from the community, which is not often entirely, educated and aware of the larger issues. But an example of a senior recommendation that came out of it was the one I was talking about, which was this need to bring paratransit service up to the same program hours as regular service, so seniors feel that they can get around in the evening. And then the response we got from our PWG, which is that it might be a better idea to make sure seniors are aware of our new Try My Ride service, which they can take at any time. Another example in Richmond was finding out that what's so frustrating is one of the ACTC routes goes right up to the top of the hill, but it doesn't reach the Social Security office. So it's hard for me to get off a block down in my, with my walker and get up to the Social Security office, which I have to get to. So one of our recommendations was extending that line just another block and a half right up to the front of the Social Security office.
Okay, well, thank you. And I appreciate you doing that outreach. I find that a lot of times we would think senior centers were great, but a lot of people that get to senior centers can drive themselves there. And a lot of seniors are homebound or have that problem. I'll use my mom as an example. She lives with me. I'm her transportation, but if she had some way to get to the doctor without me, I'm just wanting to make sure that whatever we end up doing includes, services for seniors. And it sounds like that's in there, but just wanted you to.
And just to clarify again, the recommendations I presented here tonight are literally 6 out of the 50 plus, and they were just the highest potential, high need projects, not the other tiers.
And the packet is really big. So is there a place that you could point to, or could staff send us those 50 recommendations or highlight?
They're all tabulated in the executive summary.
Okay, thank you. Because I'll take responsibility, everybody, for sending it to Debbie.
Please,
Thank you.
Karen.
We owe you, Karen.
Yeah, and I think Karen makes a good point that the advocates for the seniors, may want to come and make comments. And Greg, you probably just interviewed a lot of seniors yourself and not so many of the advocates. I don't know how that went, but.
Well, mostly a lot of the good information came from the senior center directors.
Okay.
But
Okay. Other comments here?
I'm sorry,
Kevin?
Is the executive summary split between Richmond and Bay Point, or is there just one executive summary?
Oh, no, it's split. There's
Okay.
2 different reports.
Okay. Matt, I'm going to ask you, could you Thank you.
I'll get that to you by morning, Karen.
That's fine. That's fine. Tomorrow, anytime is fine. Thank you.
Kevin, you had a question or a comment?
Well, some comments. I know the Tri-Delta and County Connection has been working on non-transferable, not transferring buses in between certain locations between East County and Central County. Like getting from Antioch to Martinez on the same bus. Try My Ride is still a very limited and still a pilot program that we're looking at and expanding. It'll take you from certain locations. It's not quite as wide open as paratransit would be, the way the Try My Ride is listed right now. It'll pick you up at your home and take you to specific designated locations. We may expand that in the future, but right now it just kind of gets you from your home to BART, from your home to shopping. It'll be something that as it grows, it may need to. Tri-Delta has also reached out and contract with both Uber and Lyft to help work with the paratransit, and because paratransit is kind of clumsy because you have to schedule it a couple of days in advance.
Yeah.
And it's a 2 or 3 hour window. They'll come and pick you up and take you someplace. Where working with Uber and Lyft is a whole lot more responsive and will take you from one location to the next, basically with just a phone call as opposed to scheduling. So there's a lot in the works that we're working with, at least at Tri-Delta wise, to address those issues of that seniors may be having of how do I get to the doctors in a reasonable amount of time without having to pre-schedule everything and be given ranges and whatnot. So there is a lot of work that's going on. It may be advantageous to sit down with both Tri-Delta and County Connection and see how those are going before as we move this study on further and see what plans and programs they already have in place or what they're thinking about that may address a number of the issues that were brought forth in this presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. And I know County Connection's working on a one-seat ride to take people all across the county. I know in Richmond also, there was something called Go Grandparent, which was sort of like an Uber or Lyft for seniors. I don't know if that's still active or not, but that might be worth taking a look at too before this comes to the full board.
Yeah, and also wanted to mention, Peter's got, accessible transportation plan that he is working on a separate effort that does focus in on some of the issues that you guys are talking about now. So I think between these two plans, we're doing a pretty good job of looking at the needs of the senior community and the paratransit population.
Yeah, that would be great. So if that could be brought up at the board meeting, so that people don't get crucified. Thank you, Peter. Do you want to say something?
No,
he's just...
I agree with Matt that we are looking at this with the accessible transportation strategic plan. So a lot of these issues are the same, and we're addressing those.
Okay, good. So other comments here. Jackie, do we have any comments from the public on this item?
No comments.
Any public want to speak? No? So then we have this item on the agenda. We're seeking approval for the Richmond area and the Pittsburgh Bay Point CBTs.
Move approval, Kevin.
Motion by Romick, second by...
I'll second it to send it to the board.
By Hudson. Any discussion? Jackie, can you take the roll call, please?
Yes, Commissioner Haskew.
Yes.
Commissioner Hudson.
Yes.
Commissioner Mitchoff.
Yes.
Vice Chair Romick.
Yes.
And Chair Kelly.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Great, thank you. So we move on. No correspondence or communications. Now, Commissioner and staff reports. I don't have anything to report. Do the commissioners have anything to report or add? No, I don't see any hands. Then, Randy, do you have anything to report?
Nope, thank you.
Okay, well, with that said, then I guess we are done, and we will now adjourn to our next meeting, quite possibly will be on January 6th, 2021 at 6 p.m. So the meeting is adjourned at 6:35. Thank you, everyone.